Good morning. I'm Jennifer Tomazik. Thanks so much for joining us for Racine Me today. You know, the weather has been very odd and very out of the ordinary. This winter, this spring, we've had a lot of deadly tornadoes across the Midwest. But when it comes to being prepared, Racine is pretty well set. Here to tell us about some of his plans for Racine County Emergency Management is David Mack. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate that. So I guess first off, how have things been so far in Racine County in terms of emergency management? Have you had to deal with many so far this year?
We've been, well, with the mild winter, we didn't have the snowstorms, the blizzards we had the year before. We've had some severe thunderstorm warnings, but we haven't had the real, to date, the severe weather we've seen in other parts of the country. But, you know, when it gets unseasonably warm like this, obviously we're concerned about it. And I'm hoping it's going to be a mild storm season, but what I'm seeing across the country, I don't think that's going to be the case.
And that's what I was going to ask too, because we've seen so many tornadoes down in southern Indiana and Illinois, so close to home, so to speak. What do you think that means for folks here in southeastern Wisconsin?
Well, I think we always need to be prepared for it, and it goes back. It was about 10 years ago in March. It was unseasonably warm, and a tornado spun up in the St. Francis, Cudahy area. And, you know, you can go years without a tornado. And for us, 2 years ago, we had 3 tornadoes in 1 year. And then going back to 2008, we had some near misses in Racine County in January of that year, but our neighbors to the south in Kenosha weren't so lucky.
And tell me, what is the role of Racine County Emergency Management? What do you guys do to help the community?
Well, we're a small office. I'm a 1.3 person office, and
1.3, huh?
We're less than 1/10 of 1% of the overall county budget. I also have 4 volunteer deputy emergency management coordinators that assist. But what we do is we would help coordinate. First of all, we do the disaster plans for the county. There's several plans that we're responsible for. We facilitate disaster exercises and drills. We're going to be doing one in April with a train derailment impacting the city of Racine and a large-scale evacuation. We've done pandemic flus, we've done tornadoes, we've done hazardous materials spills in the past. We also provide training for both the community. We had some programs this past week where we taught people how to prepare their pets for emergencies, prescription for readiness, some of the considerations you need to consider if you had special medical needs. And then we had We Energies come in and do gas and electric safety for us. But we also provide training for first responders and for our partners in industry, everything from how to deal with the media to in the incident command system, how to manage an incident itself. We do extensive public outreach, so it's a multifaceted position, one in which, you know, planning, training, exercising, public outreach, and then also the actual response to something. So when the tornadoes spun up in Racine County, we responded to the command post, we assisted, we made contacts with other agencies that needed to be notified and involved, coordinated with the National Weather Service in the aftermath of that to do the damage assessments. And then if it requires if we think that it warrants a presidential disaster declaration, we'll begin the process for that to occur.
Okay, so talking about just preparedness, you have developed a program that actually brought you out to D.C.
Right.
Tell me about that. You won an award for it.
Well, we're always trying to look at innovative ways of getting our message of preparedness out there, the planning, the training, those sort of things. And one of the areas that I had been wanting to address was planning for churches. And I look at churches both as an asset in the community. In the event that something happens, we can draw upon some of their resources. And then also, they have a vulnerability if something happens. And quite frankly, you know, this goes for businesses, it goes for nonprofit agencies, churches, and other groups. A lot of times we don't think about emergency planning until it's too late. And we're trying to tell people, if you put the time on the front end, you'll avoid spending more time on that back end trying to recover from that or to deal with it. So we put on a seminar for churches, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency recognized that program as by giving us a Community Preparedness Award for 2011. invited us out to Washington in January of this year, where we met with the Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. We were invited to the White House to participate in a panel discussion and to basically promote the programs that we were doing. So it was quite the honor to be there. And then also met with some high-ranking congressional leaders and also high-ranking FEMA leaders.
Now, were you sharing some ideas about emergency preparedness with them? Kind of an exchange of ideas?
Exactly. And they wanted to bring all of us that had won these awards, and we had won these awards for different areas. So for myself, the networking with colleagues from across the country was very worthwhile.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know, somebody over here is doing a program that we're going to be able to draw upon, and so since I've come back from Washington, I took part in a nationwide webinar with FEMA to talk about emergency planning for churches, and then just recently been invited to participate in a conference in the Chicago area in June to talk about the need to collaborate with the faith-based community.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about exactly what type of program that David has developed. We're also going to talk with a pastor at a church who has been through this disaster and is also coordinating in this program. Stay with us. Welcome back to Racine Me. We are talking about being prepared for a disaster, specifically for faith-based organizations. And Pastor Ron Auk joins David and I now. His church has some firsthand knowledge of a disaster. You are with Prayer House Assembly of God.
Yes.
And you guys went through a tornado yourself. 2008?
Right. Yep, January 7th, 2008.
Probably a day you never forget.
Well, I was out of town.
You were?
Yes.
What was that phone call like to
That
you?
was pretty amazing. My wife was in the building putting away Christmas decorations in the attic of the church when she heard the sirens going off, and they just didn't stop going off. She thought maybe at first it was just a test, but so she finally decided she better go home, and she walked into our house, and 5 minutes later she got a phone call saying your building's been destroyed, and so she just escaped it. Then I got the phone call. I was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, doing a conference, and yeah, it was pretty surreal, really, that your building's been destroyed. So
How much, when you say completely destroyed, was the
no, there was $1 million worth of damage, and
Wow.
The building only cost us $1.3 million when we first built it. So enough of
that's
it was
aerial.
destroyed. A lot of the roof was torn up, a lot of water damage throughout, and so it was quite a project just putting it back together. It was about 10 months to rebuild it.
So we're talking about disaster preparation and being prepared in advance of something like this. Did you guys have a plan in place?
No, not a specific plan. The only thing we had going for us was a really good insurance policy that covered everything. And had we not had that, we'd have been in pretty serious shape because you can see it. Most of the building had to be taken back down to the studs because of
Really?
water damage and all that. So that was the only thing we had in place at the time.
And so this is kind of one of the reasons, I suspect, David, that you wanted to start this with the faith-based organizations?
Right. My wife and I were attending the church at the time, and would still be if it wasn't for we live in a different city, and the kids ended up gravitating towards a different youth group. But the church itself, that got me thinking. Whenever we would have something major occur, though, I'd have churches within our community in Racine call me up and say, either what can we do to help? Hurricane Katrina was a good example. They wanted to help. They wanted to collect clothes and food and water and stuff like that. It's like, back up, hold on, they don't need shipments of that stuff, down there. It's going to burden the system. Or they ask, in the case of Y2K or the pandemic flu, how could this impact us? So what I did is developed a seminar, which is what we received the FEMA award for, that looked at 3 different types of plans. One would be an emergency response plan. What would happen if there was a tornado warning in the middle of services? If you Google churches destroyed by tornadoes, it's not just Prayer House Assembly of God, but all over the country. And in some churches, there's been fatalities as a result of it. So, we wanted the churches to be prepared for the different types of emergencies they could face while the service was going on, or while people were in there: fire, tornado, medical emergencies, God forbid an intruder, gunmen, that sort of thing. The second plan that we encouraged them to develop and walk them through was what in the business world we call a business recovery plan. I called it a church recovery plan. Shared with them some templates that were out there that were easy and simple to use. And Prayer House is a good example of the need to have a business recovery plan. Having your computer files backed up, having an inventory list of your assets so that when the insurance company comes, you can say, this is what we had in there, this is what it's worth. But not only that, but if you have to rebuild and buy new equipment, this is what we had, this is what we need to be able to recover. Having some alternative locations to go to. I think the advantage Prayer House had was the church was relatively new, and they had started out as a meeting in a school gymnasium. Therefore, there was some experience having dealt with, setting up on a Sunday morning, and having to take down and not having a permanent location. And then the third plan we encourage them to develop is look at your church, look at what your strengths are. How could you help us in the community after a major disaster, whether it be flooding, a tornado, whatever it might be. Some churches, very large buildings, could be a reception center, could be a shelter. Some churches, their strength is cooking meals, and first responders and people impacted, they need a good nutritious meal there. Others could provide spiritual support. So, it runs the gamut from, just utilizing your building to dealing with those felt needs that people might have. And
Ron, what were some of the first steps that you guys took after this devastating day?
Well, we one of the first things we did is we put together a care packet for our neighbors. Our whole little community there got hit. Not a lot of homes were destroyed, but a lot of them were damaged, and so we bought some weather band radios, these portable radios, put a few portable, or I should say durable food items and things like that, and we just took them around to all the homes and just told them that we were with them and wanted them to be able to be more prepared, because most folks don't prepare for this kind of thing, and so that was one thing we did. We also had a company come through now and photograph all of our equipment and all of the rooms, and that's on file somewhere else.
Now, so you have inventory of all that.
And because we found out that was a big deal when the insurance company was trying to assess the loss, it was helpful that we had some pictures of our equipment that we had just taken sort of, not on purpose, but in the background and stuff, because that's really what they had to go from. And so now we've purposely done that, so we have a lot better inventory if something else would happen. And we have designated a room to go to if there was a church service going on and there was an emergency. There are some rooms designated where people can go as more being safe rooms and things like that. But yeah, it makes you think about things you don't typically think of,
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk more with these gentlemen about the plan in place that can help your Racine community organization. Stay with us. Welcome back to Racine Me this morning. After the disaster, how do you get back on your feet? How do you help others who are living in the community and dealing with the same thing? Now, Ron, you had mentioned that one of the first things you did was reach out to the community when you were the ones that were really in need. Did you find that the community kind of rallied around you as well?
Well, they were very appreciative. It's not that all of them had suffered the same amount of damage or anything, but just the fact that we contacted them, knocked on their door, and gave them this item. I think it was very well received, and it kind of put us all in the same boat in the sense of, wow, we didn't think this would really happen to us, and yet it hit our neighborhood, our community. And so it raised the awareness of the need to be a little more prepared than we are, because you're always supposed to go to the church because nothing bad ever happens to the church, and yet this did happen to us. And so it just helped us change our mindset about emergency preparedness.
So were you the one to first sit down and say, okay, here's the things that I think need to do? Or were you in contact with David and trying to make that plan?
Well, it was a little mixture of both things. David and I have been friends for a long time, and I knew his work and what he was doing. But it was also meeting with our board and just kind of deciding what things we need to be more aware of for the future.
And now you've been sharing your story through Dave's program with different faith-based organizations. How come you thought this was something that you wanted to get on board with?
Well, primarily it was our connection, our friendship, and because this happened so close to home that Dave invited me. And so that was the initial reason. But having been involved, it created in me the necessity of that. Just by the response of who came to the conference, I realized that a lot more were thinking about this than I realized would be.
Now, Dave, did you find that that most churches were like Ron's, where they didn't really have a plan like this in place, or some maybe had some smaller ideas of things to do?
I think the majority of churches out there don't have NOAA weather radios, don't have a plan in place. You don't think about it until something happens. In the case of Prayer House, it was, didn't think about it, it's not going to happen to us. Or, even the attitude about tornadoes in southeastern Wisconsin, we don't see the devastating tornadoes like we see in other parts of the country, so it's easy to become complacent about it, whether you're a homeowner, a business owner, a church, or a nonprofit agency. So it's not just churches, but I think it's across the board. There's some complacency there. There's it's not going to happen to us type of attitude, and yet it can happen. And I like to say, we can either put the time on the front end or spend 2, 3, 4 times as much time on the back end trying to deal with the aftermath. And it was interesting in the case of Prayer House, it took 10 months to get back into the church. And as Ron was saying, there was some of the things like not having the inventory, having to recreate things by pictures that found showing what the equipment was.
In the background.
You spent more time trying to come up with those type of things. So it's not going to prevent your church or your business or your home from being destroyed necessarily, but it's going to make that recovery a whole lot easier to do. So you want that emergency response plan for the immediate. If the church would have had a NOAA weather radio and it would have gone off at the time, Ron's wife would have known, hey, there was a tornado warning for Kenosha County, get to shelter.
Get out of the attic earlier.
Especially in January. I mean, a tornado in January was pretty bizarre.
Right, and then we saw another tornado in January in 2010 again. And unfortunately, you don't necessarily think of those times, but obviously we've seen that happens.
And while she heard the outdoor warning sirens aren't necessarily meant to be an indoor warning device. And so every household, every business, every church should have that NOAA weather radio. Prayer House has a NOAA weather radio now, I believe. And so, it's an important warning device there for you. Having that church recovery plan or that business recovery plan for a business. How are you going to recreate what you had? How are you going to rebuild from that? And then, as we mentioned, that outreach plan. What Prayer House did in the aftermath, putting together those kits for the immediate neighbors, was a nice gesture. Most of them probably didn't have a NOAA weather radio prior to that. And then I had worked with one of the associate pastors bringing our community emergency response team training course to Prayer House, where they hosted this class for both parishioners and for the general public. Ironically, there was a tornado warning the day they taught that class there at the church. So
We
for
actually
those,
went into the emergency room during that conference.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
you put your plan to use then, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, it sounds like the two of you have a really good relationship here and really trying to educate the community. We're going to take one more quick break, but when we come back, we're going to tell you how you can find out some more information if you'd like maybe to have this plan for your faith-based organization. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking with David Mack and Ron Auk about being prepared in a disaster and what churches can do. And so, Ron, your church was destroyed by a tornado in January of 2008. Tell me what the biggest challenge was for you to overcome.
Well, the rebuilding itself was probably the biggest issue. Along with that was just the spirit of our church, our people. Fortunately for us, there was another local church that had an empty chapel that we moved into right away. So we didn't miss any Sunday services, actually. So that helped, but it's just the reassurance that this is going to be okay and we're going to come through this. And we did. We rebuilt, we got back in it, and we're up and running, doing well. So.
And do you feel like now that you have this plan in place that you are more secure if something were to happen?
Well, yeah. I mean, at least we have some thought of what we went through and what might happen again, and having more preparedness. Certainly that helps a lot.
And this is just a more video of everybody kind of.
Yeah.
You could definitely see the community kind of coming together.
Yeah, that was the day we moved back into the building. All of our material had been out in the parking lot in containers for 10 months, and so we put everything back together. And
that's great to see, and that's so encouraging. And this plan just seems like something that really a lot of organizations could probably use. So, David, if people are interested in finding out more about this emergency plan you've put together, where can they find information?
we have it on our website, www.racineco.com/emergency management, and go to our news link, and there's a faith-based planning seminar, or give us a call at 262-636-3515, and we'll direct them to that link. We also have in April coming up, and call our office for more information, a severe weather and spotter workshop where we have the Milwaukee Area Skywarn Association that's going to come in and do that for us. And last year we had a full house. I don't know if it was the 3 tornadoes the previous year that had people interested, but it's always very informative.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. So glad to hear things are going well at the church and that you guys were able to get back on your feet. Thanks so much for putting together all these plans. Congratulations on the federal award. Certainly doing some good things down in Racine County. So we certainly appreciate you coming this morning. And thank you so much for joining us here on Racine Me. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again next Sunday.